You would think goats are expensive to buy and keep, but today I want to prove you wrong by going over how much it costs me to buy my goats and how much it costs me to keep them. So at the moment I've got 4 pygmy goats. To start off, we've got Henry. He's a 2.5-year-old weather goat. He's big, he's bulky, he's a huge pygmy goat, but he is the loveliest goat I own and just super friendly. Now moving over to these 3, we've also got Oscar here, who's also another weather goat, 2.5 years old again, and he's lovely, he's great. He's a bit temperamental, he can get a bit headbutty sometimes, but just because he's that sort of goat, he's really lovely. I can do anything I need to do with him, and he's great. Now with these 2 over here, we've got Maya and then Phoebe. We'll look at Phoebe last. I think Maya's a fan favourite at this moment. She's got so many problems with her. We've made so many videos on her, and she's just great. She's really, really good. Just a quick side note, Maya's problems aren't anything to worry about. They're just a few things that could be slightly better about her. But apart from that, she's an incredible goat, honestly. So lovely. She's much more friendly than Oscar is. Not as friendly as Henry, but honestly, incredible goat. I'm really, really happy with her. Now if we move on to Phoebe, I got her the same age as Maya and she's honestly perfect. She's great. She's not the best at being handled or interacted with. She follows me around everywhere and she'll stand right next to me. She just doesn't like being stroked that much at the moment, sadly. But we're working on it. But by perfect, I mean she's so calm and relaxed. She just does everything by herself. She doesn't headbutt anything. She doesn't break things. She just gets on and does it. And she's also a really beautiful goat, which is really, really awesome. So for the first part of this video, I'm going to go over how much it cost me to buy my goats. I think we'll start off with Henry and Oscar, as I bought them first and they were the cheapest. So back in April 2021, I bought these 2 very fluffy, small little goats, and that was Henry and Oscar. They are weather goats, so they were only £200 each. And they were amazing because they were just so small and fluffy, but also really friendly. So this was Phoebe and Maya as kids. Now they were £350 each because obviously nanny goats can have kids and produce milk for you and all sorts of other things that weather goats can't, obviously. So that means I spent about £1,100 on goats. And in the grand scheme of things, that is a lot of money, but I spent that over a couple of years, so it kind of spread out a bit. Now I understand paying over £1,000 on goats is still a lot of money, but I want to just say it's more affordable than some animals you can buy. And I think it's really worth it, I really, really enjoy having the goats. I really like them because they're really calm now, and they're just good fun, they're different. Now as well as obviously buying the goats, you need to be able to pay for them month to month. Now this can also be really expensive because feeding the goats and obviously if you pay for rent that can also build up as well, but I found it can really be done on a tight budget. Now I won't lie to you, I don't spend loads of money on my goats. Obviously I pay for rent for my field and I pay for their feed, but I don't pay for feed all year round because like I do now, I just let them in the summer go around eating grass like they are. This time last year though, the entire field dried out, so I did have to start feeding them hay and grain again, but this year it's been so wet and just not hot at all. The whole field is still quite green. Obviously some of the longer stuff is dying out, but you can see there's all this nicer greener stuff at the bottom and the goats just go around doing their thing. Now obviously this field is not really enough to keep them going for much longer, so what I have been doing is letting them outside their field into these bushes and long grass out here. Now I found this really successful because the goats absolutely love eating all the brambles and the bushes over there. The longer grass is not really their favourite, but they do like these really tall plants here. And you can kind of see here where the goats have been eating. This used to be all really tall like that did, and they've just gone through eating this. They would absolutely love to go out and cross all of this. Like these bushes here and those big ones at the back are their absolute favourite. But it's not my favourite thing to do because they normally just walk off over towards those trees and then it's a bit difficult to bring them back. Now my biggest expense for the goats is the rent for their entire field. Now I'm lucky this isn't actually too bad, it's only £40 a month. And what I like about that is if you have your own land, you don't need to pay rent obviously, so you can bring the cost down even more. So I pay £40 a month for this every month, and that comes out to something like £480 or so for rent for the whole year, which is great. That's almost the cost of a goat, right? And what my thinking is, when I breed the goats, we can tell the kids to cover at least the cost for the rent and then also on the food as well. If you see my other videos, you will know we're getting a new field over there, so obviously my rent's going to go up a bit more, it's going to cost me more, and obviously cost money to put in the fencing and just do everything we need to do for that, but I'm trying to do that on a budget as well. But if you want to see how the new field turns up, subscribe to see how that goes. It's going to be really, really awesome and I'm so excited for it. Now I do have one other major cost for my goats, and that is their feed. So the main 2 things are rent and feed. So to feed my goats it costs me about £20 a month on average, and that is just because in the summer I don't feed the goats at all, and that's why they're going around eating all the grass, and that's why I made the video the other day of them outside eating all the bushes and the long grass. But in the winter I do feed grain, hay and straw to the goats, and that's what the main cost is. So that comes out to about £55–60 a month, where it's more expensive in the winter and then cheaper in the summer obviously, but that's just like a nice rough average. So for hay I mostly use grass hay, which actually does come from these fields sometimes, and then they just get those in their hay feeders. Now for bedding I do use straw. You can either use barley straw or wheat straw, but I much prefer using barley straw with goats because the goats actually will eat that and really enjoy it. You can see there's a lot of weighted stuff out the front, but I do sometimes give this in the summer because especially like recently when it's been raining a lot, they spend a lot of time in their sheds and it gets quite dirty, so I will need to swap it out and give them some extra straw, obviously to keep their beds nice and clean. And for the actual feed they eat, I use a brand called Galloway and MacLeod, and here in the UK, it's really good for goats. The goats have been doing great on that food, and there's kind of 2 goat feeds they provide, amongst other just general animal feeds. So there's like a Goat Master, which is really good. It's more of a kid and a weather feed, and as you can see, Henry and Oscar have been doing great on it. Phoebe and Maya, who are off over there, have also been eating that the whole time they've been here, and I think actually the person I got them from was feeding that as well, and it was incredible. They're doing really well, so you can see it's a good feed. And then there's like a Maize Master as well, which is what I'm going to be feeding the girls on when they have their kids, and that's also really good, but it's more focused towards female sheep and female goats around when they're kidding and just after, so they can produce milk and help the kids grow and that sort of thing. Now what I like about this feed is you don't actually have to feed that much. I was only ever feeding the goats about a handful each twice a day, and they're doing really well. Henry even got a little bit too big on it, and yeah, no, it works well. It's actually pretty cheap and affordable. One thing I really enjoy about feeding the goats like this in the summer, where you just let them graze and get all the food they can from the ground and then out on the field, is I've really noticed they've calmed down. They're so just relaxed now, because if this was last year I was feeding the boys hay and feed still, they were just running around like crazy creatures, just getting in the way, being painful. Henry was headbutting a lot, so was Oscar, but now they're just out doing their own thing, and it just works so well. So those are my main 2 month-to-month expenses with the goats, and as you can see, I tried to keep it as cheap as I can because I think goats should be affordable to keep. Obviously you can spend loads of money on them for like lots of rent, for example, or you're just feeding them lots of food, but I like to keep it as cheap as I can and as easy as I can. Now there is one more main cost to keeping goats, and then like a mini one at the end. The third one of those being things like fencing, shelter, or anything you like put in the field with them, like a climbing frame for example. Sadly, this is the most expensive part about keeping goats, and it's horrible because when you're first starting out with goats like I was still quite young and I didn't have loads of money, so getting the fencing and their shelters and everything ready for them was quite difficult. I'm going to give you a quick example of what I mean. So if we take the new field for example, I wanted to use proper stock fencing and proper gates, which would have worked really well, and they would have been super strong, super indestructible, that sort of thing, and very long lasting. But sadly, for even just a small area over here, they quoted about £2,000, which is way out of my budget. So sadly, I'm going to have to go for the good old-fashioned electric fencing and chicken wire combination, which honestly is not good goat fencing. I really recommend you don't do this, but it works. I will say it does work, and that's only because the goats hate the electric fencing, and the chicken wire is only there because we used it before. But I have noticed if it was just the electric fencing on its own, Henry can actually just jump straight over it, so it's not a good option, and that's why the chicken wire is actually quite good, because it acts as like a proper barrier they don't want to jump over. So basically this type of fencing is just like a budget, cheap equivalent, and it works, but it's just not the best thing you could use. Same with these sheds actually. So if we take a look here, this is the budget equivalent, which I used first with Henry and Oscar and then with Phoebe and Maya, and it worked really well. It does work as a good shed, but you can see they have destroyed it, but that's just because Henry and Oscar are just a bit evil. And then we've got this big shed here, which was probably like 2.5 times the price of this. This shed works really well, but it is very expensive. It's a bit of a weird one to explain, but I want to do something that's a bit more professional and will last longer and just is generally better fencing. Now, one of my absolute favourite things to make goats is climbing frames, as they're just really fun, and I love watching the goats climbing on something and playing with something you've built them. So for example, we've got this massive climbing frame over here, and this was all completely 100% free because I just asked people around for pallets and got a few where I could. The only expensive thing on this is the hay feeder, but that is also a really awesome budget option. Something you can make yourself, and it works really well. As you can see, it's just, it's so easy to make. You just get a pallet, chop a bit off, and then put some of these hay baskets on top, and then you can just see. There we go. They slot in place really well, and it's good because one goat can eat on this side and the other can eat on the other, and it just works so well. And this is certainly much better than using something like a hay net, which I used to do, which I wouldn't recommend at all. Just completely avoid those. Now there is one last thing to mention, and that is you will have vet bills with goats. They need to be vaccinated every 6 months, and obviously that's an expense in itself. For me, it cost me about £200 to get the vet out here to vaccinate them, which is ridiculous. It's very expensive, and it probably will be more when they come out next time. But you can also reduce this by doing it yourself. But I don't feel very confident in that, and I've never done it before, so I'm just going to let the vet do it for now until I'm either learn how to do it or have proper practice with it. There can be some other hidden expenses like renting a billy goat or new hoof clippers or something like that, but it's all very relaxed after that point. You can kind of control what you do and don't want to do with them. Now, the problem with keeping goats on this really tight budget, a bit like I do, is it's not very scalable. So, for example, I've only got the 4 goats, and it works really well because there's not many of them. But if you had like 10 or 15, you definitely want to go for some proper fencing, as it's just going to cause too many problems. And you also want some really solid like shelter, or like a really big one. So having a load of small, just junky sheds aren't really going to cut it. I know this video makes goat keeping seem very expensive, but I wanted to go over all my costs and so I had like a really good idea on how much I was actually spending on the goats. And then if you want to get goats, you can also see how much it would cost you. But I also wanted to talk about how I try and make the goats like really cheap and affordable without kind of sacrificing quality of their care, right? Because obviously I could do things even cheaper, but it would then also start affecting the goats. And I think I found a balance where I can keep it cheap but also really effective for the goats. Now, there are things I would like to change, like the fencing. I would love to do proper stock fencing, but it just isn't what we're going to be able to do at the moment. And I would love to have a second one of those like really big, good sheds, but it's just, again, probably not going to happen for a while. But we're going to keep working on it. We're going to keep trying to improve it for the goats, and we'll just see where it takes us, because there's a lot of potential with things we need to do, especially if we're going to be breeding the goats at the end of the year. And with the new field as well, it's going to be so exciting. Now, in my last video, I made this climbing frame here, so if you're interested, check out this video up here on how you can make like a really awesome budget play equipment for your goats, just out of wooden pallets and some recycled screws. I really hope you found this video useful, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.